Welcome to episode 5 of the Forrest Davis Show. I'm Forrest Davis, and tonight we have part 2 of my interview with Mark Goloby, running for the Republican write in nominee on the Texas gubernatorial race happening next week. Please go out and support him, write him in, donate to his campaign, because this is not a time to just play politics as usual with the Republican establishment. We desperately need leadership here in Texas. Texas has been failing in this regard for decades, and Mark is just the man that we need in the governor's mansion. He will advocate for conservative principles. He will stand by our party platform. I have no doubt about it. I've personally endorsed him, and he is the man for the job. Stay tuned for this interview because you don't want to miss a sentence of what we have to say. Hello, good evening. My name is Forrest Davis, and welcome to episode 5 of the Forrest Davis Show. And as advertised last week, we have Mark here again for round 2 of his interview. He is running for governor for the write-in candidate on the Republican ticket here for the 2022 gubernatorial race. So without further ado, Mark, please introduce yourself again, and then we can take it the next step at a time here for our part 2 interview.
Okay. Well, Forrest, thanks a lot. Good evening. Good evening to everybody, and thanks a lot for the opportunity to come in and be your follow-up to your last Zoom meeting. So that's great. I appreciate the opportunity here, and yeah, let's get talking. I'm down here in Harlingen. I actually had some work to do when they set me up. People said, "Well, don't quit your day job," so I took them seriously, and took the opportunity to go down to the SpaceX facility down there in Brownsville, and which is nice since we're going to be talking about education this evening. I think that's very, very appropriate because the our education system, if we're going to be going through and trying to have a rockets and rocket ships lifting off here from Texas, we're going to need a very strong public education system for our children. And right now we've got quite a bit of a mess. Okay, our Texas TEA needs to wake up to the fact that we are not going to be doing rocket launches with kids who are only know their pronouns and spend a lot of time worrying about whether they've got a litter box to do their live their furry lifestyle. So we've got a lot of work to do on the education front in the state of Texas.
I'm right there with you, right there with you. Yeah, I heard about that recently in the past year, these so-called furries. These are kids that unfortunately are taking playing make-believe and pretend to a whole new level. We are definitely in the mire in our educational lack of education, so to say. I first heard of these people. Are you familiar with What is a Woman documentary by Matt Walsh?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And most of that had to do with the obviously absurdity of transgenderism, but then there was a segment, I believe, in that documentary that talked about identifying as even animals. And there was some person, I don't know, man, woman, you can't ever tell now these days, that said that they identified as a wolf. And it was just like, that's just absurd. And unfortunately, a lot of this is being perpetuated in our school system as young as elementary school or maybe even kindergarten to take away from what has been accepted for thousands of years, what is biblically correct, what is biologically correct. There's a man and there's a woman. And now to confuse this young generation of children of other things. And so could you expand upon any of your influences or anything that could relate to that documentary, or what are you seeing in the school system or even elementary schools that are confusing these children on who they are and what they ought to aspire to?
Yes, absolutely. And another movie that I'd like to let your viewers know is Trans Wreck. I don't know if you've heard of that one, Trans Wreck.
No.
It's another very well done documentary like What is a Woman, and along the same line. So a very impactful movie. So I recommend some of your viewers take a look at that. As far as, yeah, you said, these children's imaginations, which of course, that's good. All right. It's more of the issues of the adults. All right.
Yeah.
Who are supposed to be the adults in the room. Okay. And, steer the children to the difference between make believe and reality. And that's not what's happening. And our schools are promoting, like I say, this whole issue of nouns and pronouns. I'm involved in another group called Act and Action, and in that group, we have teachers and parents involved and concerned citizens, and the teachers coming through relating all kinds of stories that is going on in a Texas independent school district that quote unquote has a high grade. And I would recommend to all parents, don't let these grades fool you. They seem to be self tests, self graded, and then everybody passes. And it's just so wonderful. And unfortunately, for the parents, we're trying to make sure their children get an education of math, science, history, English, communication, right? They're left to think their child is getting some type of level of education that they are not. And again, I look at uh, the, uh, the commissioner for the Texas Education Agency, who was appointed by Governor Abbott.
Right.
And people say, I have two camps. There are people who are 100% think he's great, and people who think he's 100% disaster. And the people who I know, people I respect, people I value their judgment and opinions. So I'm left in a quandary as to what. And all I really then look at is well, what is Texas education right now? And this guy's been in charge of it 6 years, after being appointed by Abbott. And he's been in charge of it 6 years. You look at the education, the Texas education product, and you're left with nothing but you're the commissioner, you're in charge. The schools, our public education system is where it is today. And you go through and you look at just what was back in August. There was a huge controversy going on with the State Board of Education, where they were trying to bring in basically a UN baccalaureate type history TEKS, Texas Education Knowledge and Skills,
Right.
I think is the okay. So on the takes, they wanted to go through and change it all, and they were going to go through and take out things about the Alamo wasn't great, and take out God We Trust and these other things in our out of our education curriculum for social studies. And it took, remember, you've got the Texas Education Agency commissioners appointed by Abbott. The chairman of the State Board of Education is appointed by Abbott. This program advanced so far by this work group and this work product and was presented, and it took a massive, massive grassroots revolt, all right, and a large contribution to Abbott to get this thing killed. And that is not what Texans look for in their education system. They're not anticipating that under an Abbott type administration, that this kind of curriculum would be advanced that far. And that it would take such a massive effort from the grassroots to defeat it. And yet it came down to an 8-7 vote. Thankfully, the
Yes.
pressure that was put on the commission, the chairman of the SBO, the pressure that was put on the chairman of the State Board of Education, all right, he voted with the Republicans, all right, and it was finally defeated. But it was people on the phones 24 hours. I think somebody told me like 7,000 phone calls into the governor's office. I mean,
Yes.
just, and again, I'm not going, if the Beto was governor, then I would understand why we have to fight like that and why we have to go through there and carry on those types of efforts. I'm left to question. So why are we having this? Why do we have to do this effort?
Yes, you mentioned that. That wasn't that long ago. It was maybe a month or 6 weeks ago or something like that.
It's
And
August
yeah,
time frame. August time
yeah,
frame.
that was roughly 6 weeks ago. I remember that because you may or may not be aware, I'm very much affiliated with the True Texas Project. I
Oh,
am,
okay.
Yes, yes. I
Well, then,
am. Well, reason why I bring that up is I'm a co-director here in Johnson County, but nevertheless, I get email alerts statewide. And in August, Fran Rhodes, Julie McCarty does a good job of this, but Fran Rhodes really sends
yeah,
out our citizen advocacy email. And the whole purpose of that uh, email blast is to get everybody on the same page statewide that's associated with True Texas Project, inform them of the issues that are going on of advocacy nature, right? Some legislative issue or certain issues such as the state board education uh, in this instance, and many people don't even know what the state board education is. So it's this was just a blurb out there. This is what this organization does. They're having committee meetings in Austin. Please show up. If you can't show up, please call Austin. The office is down in Austin. Please advocate that we are able to save our curriculum in that manner. And so I know True Texas Project, and I'm not saying that we only did this. I know we team up with other conservative organizations statewide, but we were one of the, I guess, one of the main advocates back in August to help get those 7,000 calls.
yeah.
So I just say I agree. I know that, and from experience, I've seen this, and I do agree with you, Mark, that if we had such a so-called conservative governor, why do we have to flood his calls, his office with 7,000 calls when that's his job anyway, is to have conservatives in areas where he can appoint in our school uh, curriculum in our school industry. So in our I agree, and I just wanted to make that brief comment before we get back to you that I can testify specifically to how hard we as the grassroots have to push Abbott. Because if he's not pushing, if we're not pushing him, then we're going to have Beto-like results. And so I just say I was there. Well, I wasn't there in Austin, but I was involved in this and with the phone calls and with all that pushing it. Hopefully, that I remember seeing how close that 8-7 vote was. So I'm just saying, yes, Mark, we're right there with you, and this is definitely something that impacts all the ISDs. You can fight to, I know in Tarrant County, they've had a lot of victories in GCISD, in Carroll ISD recently, and that's great. But the curriculum and all the other state level, areas, you have to have a conservative governor that appoints conservatives to those positions, or it kind of makes null and void to a large extent, not to a full extent, but to a large extent, the fights we have at the local level, the local school boards where concerned parents are taking those over. We have to have good state leadership. And I'll give it back to you to expound upon that in whatever way you see fit.
Well, one thing I'd like to acknowledge is that the True Texas Project actually on their endorsement page of local, they went through in their paragraph and said that I was another Republican choice, all right, along with Greg Abbott. So I was absolutely thrilled that Julie
Yep.
McCarty and Frank Rhodes kind of went through and at least gave me some level of credibility with the True Texas Project. That yeah, I'm not not that far out there, and very
Yeah.
much of a grassroots advocate, as you well know. And I just got through from Act in Action. We sent a letter to Senator Bob Hall, who's a champion. I mean, I think he's one of the finest senators we have in Austin.
Yes.
And in that, in a discussion that we'd had, he mentioned that well, he used to go through there and think that local control was better, but he's having second thoughts. And I got to thinking about that, and I said I see where he's coming from, but I said we need to look at that whole thing. You say, but who's driving some of these ISDs to perform this way? Well, the Texas Education Agency, okay, the Texas Association of School Boards, which is a complete menace. It
Yes.
is a complete menace to our state education.
Yes.
It needs to be. It's somewhat of a freestanding organization they provide the workers' comp to school districts is their primary, I guess, revenue source. I don't know all that. And then they go through and they've set up themselves as the the organization to train and provide continuing education credits for school board members.
Yes.
And then I want to say, well, I can't say they had at one of their meetings, it seems like they had some pretty strange presentations, and they are the ones that are telling school boards, and basically between the TEA, the TASB, and Texas Association of School Administrators, okay, basically you have three groups, all right, a cadre that avert the parents, subvert the legislators, all right,
Yeah.
and pervert the children. And that's where our Texas public education is today. Okay, you've got people out there telling parents they're terrorists, they're this, getting them arrested 2
Yeah.
days later. I mean, it's one thing to be arrested on the premises. It's another thing for them to show up on your front door and arrest you and haul you off, which was in wasn't in Round Rock. What was the other one? Up there around Austin, where they actually, it was 2 or 3 days later, knocked on somebody's door and then arrested them. And
Was
again,
it
then you
Dripping Springs? I'm not too sure.
no, it
Round
wasn't.
Rock. I know Round Rock was one.
Round Rock's had some issues, but this
Yeah.
oh
Oh, Dripping
uh
Springs is southwest.
Lauder, what is it? It's
Well,
right there. It's right there out of Austin. It's another one right there out of Austin.
Well, just like our last interview, I do my research before I publish this. If I can find it, I'll definitely put a link right here. So,
okay, thanks.
yeah.
So again, I mean, that I think is something that it's a big fight going on in McKinney.
Yeah.
McKinney's had all kinds of issues over there. And again, as I've been going to many of the school boards in Cy-Fair. We flipped 3 of the seats over. We're looking at coming up on the next election and doing some more, again, to bring in advocates for the parents. The school boards should be advocating for the parents. They should be looking at the best interests of the education, not whatever TEA and TASB and all these other people are throwing at them as, whatever the latest fad or fashion is to promote for our public education. There's a foundation, like I say, if we're going to be launching rockets out of Texas, and we are, which is exciting. I was down there, I took some pictures, a nice facility. And when you go through and you start to look into those things, we're going to need children immersed in math and in science and in physics,
Yes.
right? Not pronouns, furries, and these other things that the school, the Texas Education Agency and TASB and other people seem to be wanting to inculcate our children with. And it's not appropriate, and it's not a benefit to the future growth of Texas and our competitive position within the world.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to be looking at.
I'm right there with you. And you're not the only person I've heard about this, about the need to have better curriculum, specifically math, science, English skills, things like that nature, instead of all this gender theory that's really nonsense and I would go as far as to say it's satanic. But there's, I think, a bigger move at play here. I've even heard of, and again, if I can find this, I'll link it to this video, of that China's curriculum, Communist China, they're teaching their children high math, science skills, things of that nature. And then they have their agents at play here and essentially it's another form of warfare, to dumb down and to turn astray our children while their children are becoming more superior. And it's a way to attack from within. And if they can undermine our culture, undermine our youth, and then, a generation from now, when these children are adults and they're in the workforce and they're supposed to be taking leadership positions, well, America, which has been a superpower for, I don't know, much, at least since World War II, if not before, now we are, playing second fiddle to communist China and perhaps Russia and everything else. And the reason why I'm saying this is there is a larger play than just the absurdity of furries, and kids don't know what their gender is. It's a way to undermine traditional America, to make us weak, to make us subservient to our, communist and globalist rulers, and and to it's a nefarious agenda to make us weaker. I guess that's the best way to summarize that. So
I would concur on that. There's been
yeah,
issues as far as when that whole thing went down in August. There are questions as to just exactly what you're saying, which is, was there uh, international influence from China, from others in that process? And again, when you start to look at the Chinese, basically, when you look at the border, you look at the fentanyl, uh, taking a chapter out of the
yeah,
British playbook, which says get them hooked on drugs, which is what they did to the Chinese with the opium. And it will be
yeah,
up to America and Americans to realize that we have a wonderful country. We have our freedoms, our self rule. Self rule is not the norm. The
yes,
norm is to be subjects and to be subjugated.
right,
Uh, that's the normal. So having self rule like we have in America, and having the Constitution like that is a new thing. It is the quote unquote liberal thing. All right, from the standpoint of conservative is subjugation, and conservative is hey, you work. We're the elites, and you work.
yeah,
If we get caught red-handed breaking laws, we get away with
yeah,
it. Meanwhile, if you won't tell us who your source is from a hotel, we're going to call you contempt of court and haul you off to jail. All right,
right.
which is, I don't know if you heard about that with Catherine Engelbrecht and True the Vote and their
Yeah, I
issues.
heard. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Uh,
I like every now and then when I have time, I read some Gateway Pundit headlines and some, Epoch Times if I can. And I mean, mainstream media won't cover it. So that's how I find out about Greg Phillips and Catherine Engelbrecht, and how, really, I'm so disappointed at the judiciary. Well, I'm disappointed in all three branches of government, but all these rogue judges. I mean, there's just common sense stuff. Like, obviously, they're not going to give up their source, and so the judge says, they're held in contempt of court and placed in jail. I mean, like that they didn't do anything wrong. This is all political, and
well, we've
so
gone through for my write-in campaign. I've actually gone through. I don't know if you know Dr. Laura Presley, and we filed a writ of mandamus asking for some specific instructions be given to counties about counting write-in votes, both
right,
statewide and county. There's a lot of write-in candidates in counties dispersed around Texas,
yeah,
and so there seems to be this. Once they get the early voting in, there's questions as to how those particular counts will be opened and who will be able to view those counts when they do get opened. And so we're asking that we are able to have representation at central count
yeah,
when these very first early voting returns are open, so that again the public can see exactly be represented. All right, when they open those counts up and start to
right,
count. So there's some fear there that they'll open them up in some quiet place and nobody will see, and then all of a sudden the day of voting gets counted, and that all going to get recorded, and then all of a sudden in pops all these other votes. Then everybody
yeah.
goes, well, where'd they come from, and how did that happen, and all these kind of things. And you would like to think that in Texas, openness and transparency would be the rule of the day, but
Yes, well, I mean,
it's not always the case.
we've had decades of failed leadership, and I believe that's all these issues point to failed leadership,
Hmm.
and I believe that that is the essence of why you're running is we're always told, just be a good Republican, things will fall in line, but you have to really know your constitutional rights, assert them, be able to know how the system's played, and have the boldness to not compromise, not be bought off, and to be a true grassroots representative. And there's not many that fit that bill. So, Mark, I appreciate you stepping and putting yourself out there, because run for governor is not really that easy. Especially how you're doing so, and I want to commend you on fighting it, and not just allowing the system, which has failed, to dictate what it would be, but for you to make sure that you have representation in the central count system. I applaud
Well,
you for
yeah,
doing
like you said, go along and be the good Republican and vote and do these things. And I've done that. I've done that my whole life, basically.
yeah.
Okay. And again, there's been times when I've voted for, people that I did not particularly want as their candidate. But this got to be too egregious. This got to be too much of a. I mean, I ask all the time, and I don't want to repeat from last show, but to me, it's like, okay, what are you afraid of? That Beto's going to do more on the border? Do you think Beto's going to do more about these nasty books in the schools? Do you think Beto's going to do more? No, I mean, so if you're happy with the administration, I don't understand your fear. I don't understand the fear of Beto if you're going to say, well, Abbott's doing a great job. Okay. Then I don't understand why you're so afraid of Beto at all. You should be going, it's, vanilla bean versus vanilla ice cream.
Yes. From what's been presented to me is like they're just flip sides of the same coin. That's
I
kind
did
of how I
that.
see it.
I was with some folks and I was sitting down and I wrote, Beto on one side of the paper and flipped it over and wrote Abbott on the other side of the paper, saying, well, how do you want me to hand this to you? I can hand it, Beto up, or I can hand it Abbott up. Which side? Same piece of paper. Which side
Yeah.
do you want to see? So that was they kind of understood the point. Same piece of
Yeah.
paper. You just get to what side you want face up.
Yeah, I completely agree. So
Well, and
so
one other thing, real quick,
yes.
and I don't know if you did note. So after the Republican convention, right? And I don't know. I can't make a count on this, but I do know that casino gambling was roundly rejected. I want to say it was on 2 or 3 planks that it was rejected, but it was rejected.
I've
And
seen
just
one, but it could have been more. But that's the only thing I've seen.
yeah, then last Monday out he comes and says, "Hey, look, I'm
Yeah.
going to go through there and open up possibilities of having casino gambling." I mean, what kind of an affront to the grassroots that are doing everything they can to swallow and vote for him, to have them come out and say, "I know you're going to vote for me anyway, so I can just slap you in the face, because what are you going to do about it?" So it's time for Republicans to stop being the battered woman at home. All right, saying next time he'll come home, he'll be nicer. No, next time he comes home, he's still going to be drunk and he's still going to beat you up. And we need to get out of that mindset. And hopefully, this will break that and break that cycle, and get more people involved and more people to say that, yeah, we have to stand up. Nobody's going to stand up for us. No one.
I
There's nobody in DC and there's nobody in Austin. It's the grassroots. The grassroots, the Constitution was written for the grassroots, all right? And the Constitution is there to protect the grassroots from tyranny, but only the grassroots can exercise the option to make sure they defend their liberty and their property rights.
I completely agree with you. And a few things I just comment on real quick about what you've just said. I mean, we're focused on Abbott because he is the leader of the state of Texas, and his tone as leader trickles down into the state legislature and everything else. So it's right to pick at him for this. But to be honest, other than maybe 5 or less state legislators we have, they all take our platform and disregard it. Like we were talking about the planks. and whether it's the gambling plank or I assume I hope for the best, but I'm a realist and I assume they're not going to do anything with banning Democrat committee chairs and all, because at the end of the day they're all a uniparty and they all like each other and fraternize with one another regardless of the RD, because they're elitist and we're the grassroots, as you hit upon, and that is true. But the reason why I bring this up is we have the most conservative platform in the nation in terms of a state party, in terms of what we spell out. We've taken about 100 planks out, which I think probably was wise because we need to consolidate and strengthen some of the good planks. But nonetheless, I forgot it was over 300. Now it's 270. I don't know exact. I'll put it to this link how many planks we have. But
Right.
if you spell all that out, we even strengthen part of the preamble to say that human nature is immutable. We did that in the convention this year, and we did that as a direct correspondence to all of this transgender nonsense. That a man is unchangeable, a woman's humankind is unchangeable, unmutable. So I'm just saying that our platform and our planks should really, if they're enacted into law, should set the state of Texas apart, bar none, compared to any other state, and even compared, to our federal structure. We would be knocking everything out of the park. However, and it
Well,
starts
one
with
way, one way,
well,
yeah, one way to,
I'll just say this and let you respond. It starts with the governor. The governor ignores the planks, and so does our state legislature, and then they all go there and do their bidding instead of our bidding as the constituents, and they toss it all down the trash. And how would you respond to that?
if the legislators are irritated by the size of our state platform, my recommendation is well, then pass some of it.
Yeah,
Pass some of it, and then it would be cleared off, and we could scratch it off. We put in 4 years ago, all right, put in get rid of 313. We got
yeah,
rid of 313, all right. We could have taken it out, except that then Dave Phelan came out and said, "Oh, I'm going to bring it back." All right. At which
yeah,
point, then we had to go back and put into the platform that do not bring Chapter 313 or other, right, subsidized taxes, all right, into the state of Texas. And I went to the Texas Taxpayer and Research Association annual event, and it was a fascinating day. It was a 2 day, but I just signed up for one. It was an absolutely fascinating day, and the information I was able to come back with that will be used throughout this legislative session. I mean, these people just, I mean, they were just handing me bullet after bullet. Oh, thank you. I'll be, I'll be returning these in the legislative session. All right, when we were fighting some of these things, some of the comments that were made from the podium, from the front up there. So it's all public, and but being able to go through. I mean, there's I don't remember, we talked about Dave Phelan in the last legislative or in 2019, coming out saying that Louisiana is going bankrupt, giving out abatements, and so should we. And that to me is another. That's, I mean, these are golden phrases. If you go there and you listen, like you said, when you go to Austin and you listen to the testimony that's been given out, you'll find out that many times the people that your ideas that you are trying to oppose, they'll feed you great talking points that you can use. So um, that's why I encourage, just like you did, encourage people if you can. Spend time, get up to Austin, try to get up there and view. If you can't, if you can go through and look at it online, but stay and get engaged and stay engaged. This legislative session coming up is going to be very big, especially if we have the success that we feel like we're going to have on November the 8th. and then turn around and have even more success in this legislative session to ensure that the grassroots and the issues that are important to the people on a day-to-day basis get addressed, and some of these issues get fixed, especially in our public education. That's going to be a super top issue. A lot of things that we're looking at. We're looking at these Chromebooks that have all this access and all this data mining, and we're presenting to take from K through 8 and call them what they call air gap type devices. So there's no connection to anything outside what's been programmed into that device. It's basically a dumb terminal, if you will. And we can do that through K through 8. We can go through there and set up a little local Bluetooth with secure network to the teacher's printer to be able to generate and put in the homework assignments that need to get done. And we can load in the whole encyclopedia set, okay, even maybe 2 of them in the digital space that they have in these devices. And the kids can go through there and reference. If they have to do a research paper, there'll be a whole encyclopedia set, or maybe even 2 that they can go through and access and do the research on any kind of paper, K through 8. Once they get up to high school, there's a lot of things that they need to be learning. They do need to learn how to secure themselves and protect themselves from the internet. I mean, as you well know, there's a lot of nefarious, a lot of great, wonderful things on the internet, and there's also a lot of nefarious things that we want our children not to get caught up in their traps. And my children were young, in middle school when all of AOL and all these other things were coming out. And we sat down and had some very serious conversations with them, and limited even then. I mean, that was before it was gotten as dark as it's gotten. And there were things that we made sure that they didn't access, and they understood why.
Thank you. I agree with all of that. Again, very informative, and I'm glad you're running a man of principle, a great leader for the state of Texas that we desperately need. And as we've talked about with education or everything else, failed leadership has implications even in the local levels for all these things. So could you just take a minute just to wrap up, say anything else that's on your mind, and send us on out?
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity. Again, the website is www.goodgovernance.today, right? Goodgovernance.today. And you can see the issues that I talk about, everything from the border to education, to financing education, to the state being able to go through there and cut our state sales tax. I promoted that when I ran for comptroller, that we're going to have a surplus big enough to afford a state sales cut, and we can go through. Now it's even more. And so again, I feel even exonerated, because people kind of doubting what I was saying then, but it's been affirmed and reaffirmed with the amount. And so a state sales tax cut is
Wow, what a
great.
great interview. So much information in such a short amount of time. I wish I could have Mark on for much longer. And I know the 2 of us could talk at length about all of the issues in our party platform, all of our legislative priorities, and all of the politics as usual that has stymied what is Austin, Texas. We definitely need someone such as Mark, who's not a politician. He is a grassroots advocate through and through, an activist through and through, there in the office of governor, because he will actually do what he says. I fully agree with what he said, that our founding fathers envisioned this as a country, as a nation, as a constitutional republic of and by the people, and those people are the grassroots. They're not the elitist. They're not the squeaky clean, polished politicians. No, this country is made for you and for me, and that is the leadership that Mark will bring to the office of governor here in the state of Texas, and I have no doubt he would accomplish that. So please go ride him in. We have a week to get him across the finish line, and we have to do what we have to do to stand by our principles. I just want to end with this. God has given us 10 commandments, and not a single one of them is thou shalt be nice. Being nice with politicians, being nice with the political establishment and specifically the Republican establishment has got us where we are now. And I'm not saying that we need to be insubordinate or in that type of vulgarity. But what I am saying is many people run away from the fact of voting for someone other than the traditional Republican nominee because they don't think it's nice to go against who the party has selected or things of that nature. And I would just have to say we live in 2022 with a stolen presidency 2 years ago, with just incredible, the inflation rate is can't even be described. Like all the numbers are falsified. It's well more than 12.8% or whatever they want to say. Gas has come down, but only temporarily, and the only reason why gas has gone down is they're draining our reserves on purpose. The globalist depopulation agenda, the vaccines that kill you, blah, so on and so forth. All these issues are due to nefarious means of the global overlords that want to rule over you and to punish you and even murder you if so be. And this may red pill a lot of you and may not be getting all this. And I'm not necessarily speaking for Mark when I'm saying this, but I believe we agree on a lot of what we just said. The governor of the state of Texas is such an important position in the time of history that we're in that the governor could nullify all this global overreach, all this unconstitutional federal overreach here in the state of Texas. He could advocate for the state of Texas. And through the advocacy, he could make Texas the most prominent place in all of the free earth. That through policies enacted, through legislation that he gets passed, through the influence he carries in the state legislature, the governor could be our champion of freedom. And instead, we're stuck with Abbott, who is paid by the World Economic Forum. He's paid off. So I will just say this in closing. With the world burning down around us as it is, we can no longer think through the traditional parameters, the traditional thinking that got us into this mess. We have to have outside the box thinking and advocating to be able to thwart the enemy that's before us. And I believe Mark will do that as governor, and I believe we need more people like him in all the offices, state, local, county, federal, to be able to put a stop to the nefarious means that are trying to undermine us, undermine our constitutionality, undermine Christianity. And we desperately need to rally around strong people. And as as Ezekiel 22, I believe it's verse 30, states that the Lord looked for a man to stand in the gap with all the unrighteousness that's been going on in the nation of Israel. And he saw none. So the wrath and the indignation of the Lord God Almighty poured down. And what that verse means is that God works through means. God works through his chosen people. God works through his men. And we desperately need a man who will stand for righteousness, who will stand for biblical justice, not social justice, but biblical justice, who will reign righteously. And we need people like that in office, because the Lord will look down upon us and see us consumed with our sin. Will see us given over to our sin, as explained in Romans chapter 1. And when that happens, he gives us over to the lusts of our flesh. And through that, we invoke the wrath and judgment of God. And through that, his fire will consume us, and consequently our formerly constitutional republic, and it will be no longer thus. So for not only the good of the state of Texas, but for those around us. We have to put in righteous men, and I believe Mark is one of them. And so please go out and write him in for the election coming here in the Texas midterm. Election day is November 8th. Please go see your county elections office for more details of where you can vote. And with that, have a good evening. This is Forrest Davis, and next week we'll be with episode 6, and hopefully we can have another patriotic guest such as Mark, someone else who will carry the torch of freedom. And with that, thank you, God bless, and stay strong.